Exploring gender is one of those things where it's less about the specifics of what you are doing and more about the space from which you are doing it. Or at least that's how it's been for me. Like, sure, I'm making changes on the surface and I am actively pursuing transition related milestones, but I don't actually see those kinds of changes as the main point of the trans experience. Instead, it's been more like outward changes are manifestations of an internal process. And then when I do experience these outward changes, they only seem to drive me deeper into that internal process, which then in turn manifests as more of these outward changes. So I guess really it's been kind of like a cycle where this wheel of becoming just keeps on turning. So I do my inner work, and then my outer world changes, which in turn inspires me to go deeper into myself, and then on and on and on. And so, what I've noticed throughout this process is that my mindset plays an incredibly important role in the thing. And so, depending on how I am mentally oriented towards this path, I can either help or hinder this wheel of personal evolution. So, in this conversation, I want to give you a specific strategy or mindset that for me has been incredibly helpful and I would say life changing throughout this gender exploration process. But first, let's talk about one of the most common ways that we can trip over ourselves and then get in the way of our own personal evolution. And then without even realizing it, we can be manufacturing just huge amounts of pain, misery, and confusion for ourselves. And so that's exactly what happens when we explore gender from within this overly mental orientation, which says, oh, I've got gender all figured out, like I understand this thing front to back. I've examined and theorized and researched, and now after, much deliberation, I've reached the correct conclusion about what gender is and isn't. And so then based off of that conclusion, now I know what's good and I know what's bad. I know who is right and I know who is wrong. And so I know what the problem is with this world, and then I also know what the solution is, right? So obviously I'm exaggerating this perspective just in order to make a point. But what I'm trying to highlight is this tendency we have to think that we know, and then to solidify ourselves within that presumed knowing. Or in contrast, maybe you are someone who feels that currently you don't know, but you're still operating within this assumption that, well, the goal is to know. And so then you tell yourself, okay, well, if I just work hard enough and I learn enough and I expend enough of this mental energy, eventually I'm going to get to the moment in the future where I can just finally relax because then I've got gender all figured out. And so that's kind of how you orient yourself towards your path or your relationship with gender. Or maybe you look to other people who you just, from the appearance of things, it seems like they've got it figured out. And so then that makes you feel bad about yourself because, well, you don't feel quite so confident in your knowing. And then, in return, you're like, okay, now I need to put on a front and I need to mimic or I need to parrot what I've heard. And so now I'm going to be giving my power away to other people and just because it seems like they know better than I do. So regardless what the specifics are or how they're manifesting in your process, the bottom line is that I'm trying to expose these mental games, right? And which are all based on the mind's obsession with just knowing and understanding and being correct. And so the reason that this can be so dangerous is because no matter how intelligent you are, the truth of gender is not something that is going to fit neatly inside of your mental apparatus. So it doesn't matter how woke you are, how progressive you are, the mind is not designed to understand fully something that is gender is more vast it's more expansive, it's more limitless than how the mind operates. So it goes beyond the edges or the confines of the mind. And so really what this means is that you need a mental attitude that positions you in such a way where there is enough room for the mystery of gender to remain a mystery. And so that's what our strategy is all about, including the intellect in our journey, because it is an important part of how we can understand and know gender. But we need to do it in a way where we're opening the door to a truer knowing. And so then, just as a side note, if you want to learn even more about why trying to understand gender with the mind falls short, then you can check out this video, and it's more of a deep dive into that topic. And so I'll tell you how you can shift your relationship with gender from primarily being like mind-based, shifting it down to being heart-based. And so there will also be a link in the description. Okay, so let's get into today's strategy, which is called return to the beginner's mind and relax into the recognition that it's okay to not know. In fact, it's more than okay, because this is actually an extremely intelligent and wise way to explore, well, not just gender, but life. So this is the person who moves through the world from within a simple, curious, and open mental stance. So it's not grasping, it's not pushing, not jumping to conclusions, just quietly, patiently, lovingly embracing what is and saying yes to life. And so just to be clear, beginner's mind doesn't mean be ignorant or stupid. Instead, beginner's mind is about just embracing who you are, but without defaulting to this mental conceptual model about who you think you are. And not only that, but embracing your gender exploration without relying on a conceptual model about what you think gender is or isn't. So the beginner's mind is advantageous to the gender explorer for a lot of reasons. The main one being, like I said, it doesn't have to have everything figured out, which is kind of like it's like a mental exhale. Things are hard right now, sure, that's okay. Gender is confusing, that's okay. My world is chaotic, that's okay. Like, it's okay to be right where I am, whatever that looks like. And I don't need to waste my energy fighting with others, I don't need to defend myself or prove myself, and I don't need to outsmart my enemies. Instead, I'm just gonna exist, and I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't need to engage with all these fancy theories. I don't need to have some educated opinion. I don't need to rely on some woke story about why gender is a construct and society is brainwashed. Because all these different mental games, they're just crutches, right? It's something that we can lean on. It's something that we can feel safe inside of. But instead, if we can train ourselves to be simple-minded, then we can recognize that, really, at the end of the day, I'm just me. That's all I can really, truly get behind. I am who I am. So in a gist, that's the beginner's mind. It's simple, it's open, spacious, curious, and then when this mind looks at gender, it doesn't bring all that baggage from the past, it doesn't project into the future, it doesn't jump to these wild conclusions, and it doesn't compare itself to other people or to the rest of society. But instead, it simply sees, so it looks at gender, and it just sees a vast landscape of creative potential. Or in other words, the beginner's mind looks towards gender and sees an opportunity to explore an incredible mystery. And it doesn't have to understand the mystery from a conceptual perspective. And the key to entering into that mystery is, of course, with your beginner's mindset. And then once you actually get in there and you're on this path of exploring gender, well, it's gonna be you're gonna need a few more tools in your tool belt. And there's gonna be other perspectives that are going to really benefit you. So watch this next video and I'll share with you the 3 most important skills that you're gonna need to cultivate in order to continue walking this path as an empowered gender explorer. All right, my friends, that's all I've got. I'll see you in the next one.